Sparklings, lightnings, hybrids, everyone in between. How are you? I hope you're well. I realized that I had quite a bit of comments with some really good questions that went unanswered, and some of them were on some quite old videos. I apologize. I know, it's shameful. I see you now. So I am going to answer them today to the best of my ability and from my perception, because a lot of these things are heavily debated among the left-hand path community, especially. All of these answers are going to come from my work personally and my craft, from my long journey on witchcraft. I do have a lot of new viewers, and welcome, by the way, and thank you so much for subscribing and being here with us. I say us because sometimes I have more than one personality, and I mean, the spirits around me, you know, us. But anyway, my long journey in witchcraft, which started out when I was like, God, between 13 and 15, I cannot remember now. And it started, like most, with Wicca. And then for a long time, I followed that traditional path, traditional witch path. And then I went into like left-hand path occultism and working with demons. Now I'm here practicing Thursatru, which, if a lot of you don't know, it's like taking Luciferianism or Luciferian concepts and mixing it with the Norse pantheon and magic. But anyway, ultimately, over all of my years of work in this, I've really come to the conclusion that all of these that we speak of, gods, deities, demons, what have you, are interdimensional, extraterrestrial in nature. I'm just telling you this so you can see the growth and expansion over the years, how I got here and where my mind is now, especially compared to some of my first videos where these questions, some of them were. I think they are really good topics in witchcraft, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to talk about them because I never actually just did videos on these. But if any of these topics give you some excitement or you want to know more about them, just leave me a comment and I'll do a whole video on each topic, because I'm kind of going to briefly cover them and brush over them. So number one is, what is a spiritual compass? This video was under one of my quite older ones, and I had briefly mentioned using my spiritual compass in it. And so your spiritual compass, this can mean a couple different things to a couple different witches or practitioners. I'll briefly cover each concept of them and then tell you what it is for me ultimately now versus then. But you could have a literal physical object like a compass that you consecrate for finding things or for divination purposes, or I've even seen people use them to point them toward like where spirits were or sacred land and such. So east means within, west means without, and north is above, and south is below. So if you were searching for something and it landed on east, you would be going within for that answer. If it landed on north, you would look to the spiritual realm for that answer. To me, of course, you could look to the sky for that answer. It all really depends on how you view it, because the whole as above, so below thing, I tend to personally feel like the below is the material realm, and that includes our cosmos. That includes the universe and everything in the sky, because that is a part of our world if we can perceive it, right? So I feel like the above is actually above all of that. It's the spiritual reflection of our world, the astral, the ethereal, however or whatever you want to call it. But another way to look at the spiritual compass is through visualization and meditation techniques. And that's where you would visualize your spiritual compass, and you would ask your question and visualize the needle turning, and it would stop on your answer in your mind's eye. Now, for me, my spiritual compass is ultimately my intuition. That is what guides me in my path, always. I could see where a consecrated tool would be very useful, though. I wouldn't mind actually making one here soon to use, but spiritual compass is my intuition, because my whole practice now, everywhere I go in my practice or on my path, my intuition is guiding and leading me always. Always. For example, at the beginning of the year for my 13 keys tag, I wrote down all the goddesses I wanted to work with, but intuitively I felt a certain energy and was pulled to it, so I went with that, and that really changed. Kali I'm now working with for 2 months, like I did Lilith, just because it feels and seems appropriate. I have not learned all I need to learn from Kali, which, by the way, I really need to do that video, because, ooh, the keys that Kali has been giving me. My perception on Kali, off topic a little, but my perception on Kali has totally changed. She's so much more than this wrathful demon monster. I mean, she is a protector, a beautiful energy, fierce energy, and she has been giving me dreams of time. I don't know how to really explain it, like a time warp of I am experiencing past and present things at the same time. I know, but we'll get into that in my video coming up soon. Anyway, so ultimately that is what your spiritual compass is. The next question was, what is an astral temple? So in some of my older videos, especially when I was doing different workings with daemons and such, I mentioned my astral temple a few times. And I guess that concept, I mean, you can really think about what it is in short with the name, a temple in the astral, and you'd be right. But to further that, your astral temple, in theory, is supposed to somewhat mirror or reflect your sacred space in your waking reality. However, it doesn't have to. I'm a witch that really doesn't like rules. So I don't have the space nor the room to create the sacred space I want. My whole room is my sacred space. My kids, a lot of people know they are not allowed in here without, permission. My partner highly respects the sacred areas of my room. But you got to work with what you got to work with in this reality. So my temple in the astral is a lot more lavish than the one I have here. And how I use that temple is when I go to astral. I've done many, many videos on lucid dreaming, astraling, dream walking, and how you achieve that. It took me many, many years to get this down. Now, the last few years, I've had a little bit of weird trouble. I don't know if I've blocked myself or what, but my dream work is starting to pick back up where I have control again. And I'm really excited for that. But I was able to construct and build and shape my astral temple in the astral realm lucidly how I wanted to. You don't have to do this only in dreams. You can do this in your mind's eye and through visualization. Everything we think, everything we feel, manifests in that realm, and it does so instantly. So if I ever go to astral or dream walk, or I want to specifically control what I dream about, or to an extent what I dream about, I will start in my astral temple and then navigate through there. There's a lot more to this. If you want me to do an entire video about astral temples, leave me a comment, because we will get in depth and I will explain it all step by step. But yeah, so your astral temple is a sacred space in the astral that is for you and you alone. Although I will say, I have worked with my son. He's a very good and avid astral projector, very lucid one. And to help train him and such, we will agree to meet in my astral temple and go on some adventures there. It doesn't always become a success, but a lot of times it does. And it's really, really neat, super cool and fun. Another question was, what is a black flame, or your black flame? So I learned about this concept working with Luciferian path, and this too can be debated among the left-hand path community. So I'm going to tell you what the black flame is to me, and all of us have it. All of us have one. So some say in short that it is consciousness, and I do agree. However, I think we could look at the black flame symbolically a lot deeper than just consciousness. So take the symbol of fire, right? That means like your will, action, connection to other realms. We all know that fire and the elements have a connection to other things. The color black, that's like the unseen, the hidden, or the void or nothingness, because they say black isn't a color. I mean, I disagree, but that would be the hidden power within us. Your black flame is a source of power of your magic. It is the light to our individual darkness, which illuminates our path to divinity or our godlike selves. Some also argue that it's only a symbol for your soul. Again, I could see that, but I like to look at it more like it's our infinite potential in our power or magical practice. A light that leads us to the void or to our true self. And I totally agree with that. To me, it is a symbol of the sacred God within us all. A symbol of our transformation from mere puny human to our power and our divinity. It is a key to our self-deification. Which brings us to our next question. What is self-deification? In short, it is seeing yourself as a god. Almost like self-worship, as in you living your life to your rules and like your own god. So when practitioners say godlike self or God self, I know to the uninformed it can seem a little arrogant or delulu. And I've even seen some videos made where people's reacted to some of the witchy or occult community, and they're like, look how delusional this side of YouTube is. They think they're gods. Well, it's really no different than, you know, noticing the divinity within yourself when you say you are a part of source, or we are divine beings living a temporary human experience. What do you think that means if we're part of the divine? That we too are gods, or if you say you are God, you know, at your highest level. Not so much that we're going to transform into Odin, you know, in a few years when we ascend and we'll have all Odin's powers. No, it means use Odin as an example and live life like he did, not answering to anybody, only yourself. Because that's your true power, and all power is in the mind, since all battles of the world are in the mind or come from it. And it means that one day when you are not limited in this realm or in this form, you will be in complete power of your divine self. A lot can be said about this topic as well. Again, a lot of left-hand path practitioners heavily debate on self-deification, but that is my answer and I am sticking to it. I wasn't sure if I was going to touch on this next one because some people in the left-hand path community can be quite sensitive about these topics and it can start a whole mess of drama. But I'm going to touch on it briefly from my point of view, and please note, when I talk about Satanism versus Luciferian, I'm not going in full depth here. I'm kind of skimming over this really quick because time is precious. I have so much time. Unless you leave me in the comments you would like a full video on what Satanism is, that would take up one whole video. And then what Luciferianism is, that would take up a whole nother one. If you want further in-depth information, there's many people talking about it in the community. There's many different ways you could explore this. But I'm going to give it to you from my point of view, and we are only talking about LHP Satanism. We are only talking about Luciferianism overall and different ways people work with daemons or these type of symbols or figures. I'm not going to go into all of the branches that we have under the umbrella, because now you have a bunch of different types of Satanism. You have a few different types of Luciferianism. And these labels, I think, just kind of confine us. That's my opinion. I've been vocal about that before. I'm not going to box myself in. I just say I'm a left-hand path practitioner. Even though I work with the dark and the light, I balance both. And I say that because the majority of the time I work with the darker currents of the being, deity, what have you. And I don't just put myself into one practice or the other. I pull from whatever the hell I feel like pulling from. It always kind of makes me chuckle a little because I don't understand how people that really reject dogma, want to live in that rebellious spirit, confine themselves, you know, and that's not a hit toward anybody here. I just truly don't understand that, where it's like, you know, you claim to be a person that rejects all forms of this, yet you'll point the fingers and yell and scream about how someone ain't practicing Satanism right, or how this person isn't a real Luciferian, or, you know, etc. This whole part of that community really just, it irritates me. That's why I'm more solitary in my left-hand path side of YouTube. I actually seen the other day a girl made a video, and her work isn't too bad, you know, from my opinion. But because she did not look dark and edgy how I sometimes do or others do, she had a lot of left-hand path community members attacking her and saying that she wasn't really on the left-hand path. She didn't look the part. She looked too girly. How you look has nothing to fucking do with it. But anyway, a lot of these issues that I see just really, they're very contradicting to me, very hypocritical. So I don't label myself one or the other, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to briefly touch on similarities that LHP Satanism has and Luciferian practice has, and then what are some differences. Again, I can go much deeper into this. Don't come at me for not putting every little bit of information on it, because I'm not here to do that. I'm just going to briefly cover it. And I do want to note that there are a lot of great left-hand path community members, some beautiful ones that do beautiful work. They are very experienced, very knowledgeable, and I would recommend some. You know, I'm not saying and trying to lump everybody in here into one group. It's just from my experience, and it looks like a few others on YouTube, what seems to be a certain type of mentality in some of that community. But in all communities, you get bad seeds in them all. So it's not a left-hand path thing. It's very much a person's mentality as an individual thing, and then people jump on a bandwagon to stroke their ego. So let's talk about some of the similarities first. Both, in my perspective, tend to look at themselves as their own God. They very much reject being on their knees to a God, subservient, no questions asked, and walk through blind faith. They put faith in themselves. They very much walk to their own beat of their drum. They are not here typically to worship. If they work with a deity or a entity, then usually it is to gain knowledge or higher learning of occult practices or magic. Each hold their own ideas of their ethic and moral code. They define for themselves what is moral, what is ethical, and most of the time will have the attitude, you reap what you sow, don't start none, won't be none. There is no like turning the other cheek. You will be treated accordingly. And they determine these things again for themselves, often using a lot of excess or pleasurable things of life for their joy or symbols of rebellion or for their own pleasure in their own experiences. Sometimes it is a little bit of a jab to the dogmatic religious industries, but a lot of times it's for them because they want to enjoy life to the best of their ability. So they're not going to let anybody hold them back on the pleasures of life by telling them it's a sin, you can't do that. Both tend to reject anything dogmatic, and both seem to be an antagonist to religion. However, a lot of them that I speak with tend to share my same opinion about this. I am antagonistic towards religion. However, people of religion, though they can get very, very frustrating sometimes, they can be very rude, they can be very vicious. Like I said, don't start none, won't be none. It's all up to the individual how they choose to handle that situation. However, overall, a lot of us don't hate Christians. We don't hate Catholics. We don't hate people who are of these religions. We view them kind of as victims of like the religious programming or brainwashing, and think that they are quite dependent on it and quite restrained or in shackles. So really, I tend to have a lot of pity for them because they know not what they do, if that makes sense. A lot of them, don't even know their whole Bible. And if they did, the world would be a little bit different, I feel. But it isn't inherently just this hate towards everybody in that religion. It's more hate towards the religious organizations and for assholes. Now let's get into the versus aspects of the two. So a Luciferian respects and works usually with Lucifer as a enlightened being of knowledge and illumination of their path, and they're working towards ascent and self-deification. Satanists usually, and this isn't all of them, but Satanists usually use Satan as a symbol more so than a deity, although some do work with Satan, but we'll get into what that's labeled in a bit. They use Satan as a symbol of carnality or human nature and the material realm and rebellion and working with all of the sin and pleasures of life to kind of rebel against the religious dogma. They challenge the social norms and they can be very politically involved. Some are atheists. And that's kind of a very shallow way to put this, but like I said, I'm pressed for time. Personally, Satanism, I never vibed with. To me, it can still be very narrow in thinking. Nothing against Satanists. Do you, baby? But it wasn't for me. Luciferianism actually has some roots in Gnosticism, and I feel like there is a lot of enlightening knowledge in Gnosticism. And Gnosticism heavily changes or implies that a lot of the bad guys like Lilith, Samael, a lot of these beings, Gnosticism makes you see the good in them, the light in them, or at least to where you can understand why they do what they do. And the symbolism in these stories of these people or beings really can help enlighten you or open up doors to further knowledge. Luciferianism kind of helps balance that light with the darkness, illuminates in the darkness. Now, demonolatry is kind of different. You could be a Satanist, you could be a Luciferian, you could be anything left-hand path labeled and be a demonolatrist. What that is the practice of demon worship. So they would worship Satan, they would worship Lucifer versus working with them, standing beside them as equals for knowledge. And then, of course, you have demonology, and that is just the study of demons and such beings. Like I said, I just label myself left-hand path practitioner. I don't choose a side. I'm not going to choose a label, really. But anyway, I know that was really short. If you would like me to elaborate on these topics, please do leave me a comment on which topic you'd like me to elaborate on. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this, and I will be seeing you guys soon.